That creek's not yours anymore, Mr. Kincaid. It's an amenity now. Denise Faulkner said that standing in my dry creek bed, in white linen pants, holding a clipboard like it was a badge. Behind her, a bobcat loader idled, chewing diesel smoke into the morning air. Behind that, 40 feet of my grandfather's creek bank lay gouged open, raw red clay exposed like a wound. By the time this was over, the Ridgeline Trails Homeowners Association would owe more than $2 million in restitution. Denise Faulkner would stand in a courtroom in handcuffs, and the 90-year-old water right nobody at that HOA had bothered to read would end up mattering more than any bulldozer they owned. I didn't say a word to her that morning. I just wrote down the time, 7:12 a.m. Tuesday, and took 11 photographs. I'm Walter Kincaid. I'm 63 years old, I'm a licensed hydrologist, and I own the water. Not the lake, not a swimming pool, the actual legal adjudicated right to the water running through Kettle Creek. The same creek Ridgeline Trails had spent 3 years trying to turn into a private beach club. They thought I was just some old rancher sitting on land they wanted. They were about to learn what it means when the man with the shovel also holds the deed to the river. Kettle Creek runs through the back 40 of what's left of my family's place. 214 acres my great-grandfather Ezra Kincaid homesteaded in 1899, and what my grandfather Elias formally proved up and recorded water rights on in 1911. The ranch house still has Ezra's kitchen table in it, built from bur oak he cut himself, the surface worn smooth as riverstone from 4 generations of elbows. I grew up smelling cut hay and diesel and the mineral tang of creek water in August. My father is buried on a rise above the north pasture, next to my grandfather, next to my great-grandmother. 3 generations of Kincaids are in that ground. I'm the 4th, there won't be a 5th working this land. My daughter's a schoolteacher in Tulsa, happy there, so in a sense, I'm the last man standing between what Ezra built and whatever comes after me. What comes after me was supposed to be Ridgeline Trails' problem, not mine. When the ranch to the south got subdivided into 340 homes back in 2004, my property became the weird holdout, 60 acres of pasture and creek frontage surrounded by cul-de-sacs. I don't ride into town much, I don't go to city council meetings. I fix fence, I run 20 head of cattle, I consult on groundwater cases 3 counties over. I look, by any measure, like a man with nothing left to fight with. Denise Faulkner looks like the opposite. 51 years old, HOA president for 6 years running, always in a blazer that cost more than my truck payment, always driving a white Range Rover with a vanity plate that said RIDGE 1. She carried a clipboard everywhere like it gave her jurisdiction. Her voice had that particular tone people use when they've decided you're already beneath discussing terms with. She'd built her whole reputation on the Lakeside Amenity Initiative, turning a bend of Kettle Creek, right where it crossed the HOA's common ground easement, into a members-only beach club. Sand imported, a dock, cabanas. She'd been selling founding member shoreline shares to residents for 2 years. I didn't know yet that the shares were 3 times oversold. I just knew she wanted my creek, and she'd already decided I didn't have a say. The first bulldozer came on a Tuesday in April at 7:12 in the morning. I know the exact time because I keep a hydrology logbook out of habit, 29 years of professional muscle memory, and I wrote it down before I even understood what I was looking at. I heard the diesel engine before I saw the machine. Walked out in my boots, coffee still in hand, and found a bobcat loader parked in the middle of my North Creek bank, its blade already dropped into the earth, chewing through cattails and root mat like it was nothing. A crew of 3 men in Ridgeline Trails polo shirts stood around a laminated site map zip-tied to a stake. The map showed the creek bend rerouted, widened, sand-lined. It had the HOA seal on it. It did not have my signature anywhere on it. I asked the foreman who authorized this. He pointed at the stake, at a sheet stapled underneath the map, a notice of common area improvement, citing something called an implied easement for community benefit. No such thing exists in Texas water law, not for a private, adjudicated stream. I know because I wrote the peer-reviewed paper on riparian easement doctrine that half the state's water district engineers still cite. I didn't argue with the foreman. Arguing with a man on a machine gets you nothing but a bulldozer that keeps running. I took photographs, 11 of them, time-stamped, showing the machine, the crew, the site map, the exposed bank, the cattle standing confused in the shallows where the water had gone brown with churned silt. Then I drove into town and mailed Ridgeline Trails HOA a certified letter, return receipt requested, informing them that Kettle Creek and its banks, from the northern property line to the historic diversion point, were private property held under Texas Water Right Permit number 1911-0447, and that further excavation would be documented as trespass and injury to a certificate of adjudication under Texas Water Code section 11.086. They bulldozed the bank again on a Thursday, and again the following Tuesday. Each time, I said nothing to the crew. I photographed, I logged the time, I mailed another certified letter. By the fourth notice, I had a folder 2 inches thick and a very clear paper trail showing exactly who'd been told, when, and how many times they'd chosen to ignore it. The first time I met Denise Faulkner face-to-face was at the mailbox kiosk at the entrance to Ridgeline Trails, 3 weeks in. She rolled down her Range Rover window, sunglasses pushed up into blonde highlights, clipboard on the passenger seat. "Mr. Kincaid," she said, like she was doing me a favor by remembering my name. "I understand you've been sending letters. I want you to know the Lakeside Amenity Initiative has full board approval. It's happening. I'd hate for this to get unpleasant for you." "It's already unpleasant," I said. "For my cattle, they drink that water." She smiled the way people smile when they've already stopped listening. "It's just a creek, Mr. Kincaid. It's not like you own the water." I didn't correct her, not yet. I just said, "Have a nice day, Ms. Faulkner," and drove home to keep building my file. Here's what most homeowners, and apparently most HOA presidents, don't understand about Texas water law. Surface water in this state doesn't belong to whoever owns the riverbank. It belongs to whoever holds the adjudicated right, going all the way back to the doctrine of prior appropriation. First in time, first in right. My grandfather filed his claim on Kettle Creek in 1911, decades before Ridgeline Trails was ever a cattle pasture waiting to be subdivided. That certificate doesn't expire. It transfers with the land, and it transfers with a recorded easement on the historic channel itself, which meant every scoop of that bulldozer wasn't just rude. It was a documented violation stacking up, letter by letter, against a legal instrument older than the HOA's own charter. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what I do for a living, except this time the case file had my own name on the plaintiff line. I pulled the original 1911 certificate from the county records office, the paper gone soft and brown at the folds, my grandfather's signature still dark where he'd pressed hard with a fountain pen. I pulled the recorded easement on the historic diversion channel, cut through limestone by hand in 1932 during a drought, still visible if you knew where to look in the brush behind my equipment barn. I cross-referenced Ridgeline Trails plat maps against the county's GIS water district overlays, and that's when the ground shifted under the whole thing. The Lakeside Amenity Initiative wasn't a $200,000 landscaping project. Permit applications filed with the county, sloppy ones, half completed but filed, showed projected build costs of $340,000. But the HOA's own newsletter, which I finally started reading closely, had been advertising founding shoreline membership shares since the year before, at $15,000 apiece, capped at 150 members. I did the math twice because I didn't believe it the first time. 150 members, $15,000 each, $2.25 million. And that was before premium cabana upgrades, which ran another $50,000 for the top 20 spots. The number that finally made me sit down at Ezra's old bur oak table with a legal pad was $2.3 million. Money collected from people 2 streets over from me, for a beach club being built on water Denise Faulkner didn't have the legal right to touch. And I found something else while I was digging. An elderly widow 3 doors down from the construction site, Eleanor Massey, Ellie, everybody called her, had gotten a letter from the HOA the same week the bulldozers started up. Her husband Frank had been Army, 2 tours, dead 6 years now, and Ellie lived alone on his pension with an oxygen line running to a portable tank she pulled on a little cart. The HOA's letter cited her for unsightly medical equipment visible from the street and threatened a $500 monthly fine unless she screened her oxygen concentrator from public view. She'd started crying on her porch, she told me later, not because of the fine, but because Denise Faulkner had stood right there on the sidewalk and told her the board was exploring options regarding residents who couldn't maintain community standards, and that maybe it was time Ellie considered assisted living. They wanted her gone. They wanted her lot. It backed onto the creek, and it had the best sightline to the new beach. That's the moment this stopped being about my cattle and my creek bank. That's the moment I decided Denise Faulkner was going to find out exactly what she'd built her beach club on top of. The next red line came 11 days later, and it wasn't about my creek anymore. I'd filed everything by then. TCEQ, notification of a lawful diversion under Texas Water Code Section 11.081, county permits for restoring the historic 1932 channel, and a formal 30-day notice to every downstream property owner, including Ridgeline Trails, informing them that Kettle Creek's flow would be legally redirected to my grandfather's recorded diversion point. I sent that notice by certified mail. I sent it to the HOA's registered agent. I sent it to the county watermaster's office, and I sent a courtesy copy to the sheriff's department, because I've learned that paperwork without witnesses is just paper. Denise Faulkner didn't read it, or she read it and decided, the way she'd decided everything else, that it didn't apply to her. What she did instead was send the crew back out, not to my land this time, but to Ellie Massey's. The beach club's grand opening was 9 days away, memberships oversold and money already spent on sand and dock pilings, and Denise needed one more thing, a clear sightline from the new cabana deck, unobstructed by Ellie's chain-link fence and the little wooden shed where Frank Massey used to keep his tools, and where Ellie now kept her backup oxygen tanks. I have a game camera on a post at the edge of my property, the kind ranchers use to watch for coyotes getting into the calves. It faces south, across the fence line, toward Ellie's lot. At 9:40 that Thursday morning, it caught the bobcat loader crossing onto her property without a permit, without her permission, and without so much as a knock on her door. It caught the blade catching the corner of the shed and dragging it 11 feet, splintering the door, spilling 2 oxygen cylinders into the grass. It caught Ellie Massey coming out onto her porch in her housecoat, oxygen line trailing behind her, both hands over her mouth. And it caught Denise Faulkner standing off to the side in a cream-coloured blazer, clipboard against her chest, saying to the foreman, loud enough that the camera's audio picked it up clean, "Just get it out of the frame, she'll thank us later." I didn't confront anybody that day either. I drove Ellie to the urgent care to have her checked out, made sure her tanks weren't damaged, and got a reportable line running off my own generator for the night. Then I went home, downloaded that footage, and made 4 copies. One went to my attorney, one went to the county attorney's office with a formal complaint citing criminal trespass and reckless damage to medical equipment belonging to a disabled senior, a clear violation under Texas Penal Code Section 22.04, injury to an elderly individual. One went to the sheriff's department with a request that a deputy be present at the HOA's scheduled beach club grand opening the following Saturday in case of a civil disturbance. And one went to a reporter I'd known for years at the county paper who owed me a favour and had a nose for exactly this kind of story. Here's what most homeowners don't know. An HOA board can vote on all the amenities at once, but it cannot authorise trespass onto private property, and it cannot override a senior water right that predates its own charter by nearly a century. Every bulldozer pass, every threatening letter to Ellie, every dollar collected for a beach that didn't legally have water rights to exist, all of it had been building a case that didn't need me to raise my voice a single time. It just needed me to keep the folder thick and wait for the right morning. Saturday came clear and hot, the kind of Texas morning where the air already tastes like dust by 8 a.m. Ridgeline Trails had strung banners along the new sand berm, grand opening, lakeside at Ridgeline Trails, and folding chairs set up on the dock for what Denise Faulkner was calling, in her own newsletter, a historic day for our community. Maybe 150 residents stood around the fresh-dug basin, the water in it low and cloudy, but still there, still fed by the diversion cut illegally into my creek bank. Denise stood on the dock in white linen again, scissors in hand, a ribbon strung between two posts, a county commissioner beside her for the photo op. I walked up at 9:58 a.m. with my attorney, a TCEQ compliance officer I'd coordinated with for 2 weeks, and a sheriff's deputy standing a few respectful steps behind. Denise saw me and his smile flickered, just for a second, before she recovered it. "Mr. Kincaid," she said into the small PA microphone, half joking to the crowd. "Here to finally join the club?" A little laughter went through the residents. I didn't laugh. "I'm here to exercise my water right," I said, loud enough that I didn't need her microphone. "Permit 1911-0447. Recorded easement on the historic channel, restored under county authorization 48 hours ago." I held up the signed permit, and the TCEQ officer beside me held up his badge. "As of this morning, Kettle Creek no longer feeds this basin. It never should have." I nodded to the officer. He walked to the intake gate my crew had installed at first light, quiet as sunrise, at the historic diversion point behind my equipment barn. The same limestone cut my grandfather had dug by hand in 1932. He turned the wheel. You could hear it before you saw it, a change in the water's voice, a drop in pitch, the little rush at the beach club's inlet pipe thinning to a trickle, then a drip, then nothing. Over the next 20 minutes, in front of 150 residents, 2 reporters, and a county commissioner still holding a ribbon he no longer knew what to do with, the lakeside amenities basin began to recede, mudflats spreading out from the shoreline like a slow bruise. Denise Faulkner was still holding the scissors when the second set of vehicles pulled up. No lights, no sirens, just 2 unmarked sedans from the County Frauds Division, acting on a securities complaint filed weeks earlier by an attorney I'd hired to trace the Improvement Corporation she'd used to funnel membership fees. They didn't need me to say a word. They had bank records. They walked her off the dock in front of everyone she'd sold the dream to, scissors still dangling from her fingers until a deputy gently took them. Denise Faulkner was indicted on 11 counts, including securities fraud, mail fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1341, misapplication of fiduciary property under Texas Penal Code Section 32.45, and injury to an elderly individual for what her crew did to Ellie Massey's shed. The investigation found she'd collected $2.3 million in founding shoreline memberships through a shell company called Ridgeline Improvement Partners, of which she was the sole undisclosed owner, while the actual beach construction had cost the HOA barely $340,000, the rest simply gone, wired through 3 accounts before landing, mostly in a renovation on her own lake house 40 miles east. She pleaded guilty rather than face trial. The court ordered $2.3 million in restitution to be paid to the 211 residents who'd bought memberships, plus an additional $180,000 to cover damages to my creek bank and Ellie Massey's property. She was sentenced to 7 years, with parole eligibility after 3, and permanently barred from serving on any homeowners association board in the state of Texas. Her Range Rover was sold at auction. It barely covered a quarter of what she owed. 2 board members who'd signed off on her paperwork without asking questions took plea deals, community service, testimony against her, and a lifetime ban of their own. The construction foreman who'd driven the loader onto Ellie's lot lost his contractor's license for a year and paid her medical equipment claim out of pocket. The creek runs clean again now, back in the channel my grandfather cut with his own hands. My cattle drink from it every evening, the way they have for 4 generations, and the old bur oak table still sits in my kitchen, scarred and steady, exactly where Ezra set it down in 1899. Ellie Massey got a new shed, paid for by the HOA's insurance settlement, and something better than that, she got elected the new president of Ridgeline Trails Homeowners Association, unanimously, the following spring. First thing she did was drop every fine ever issued against a resident with a medical accommodation. Second thing she did was invite me to a board meeting, just once, to say thank you. I told her the water had already said it for me. What I learned, watching all this unfold, is simple enough to fit on a fence post. A deed matters more than a clipboard. 100-year-old signature outlasts a fresh coat of paint. And the folks who look like they've got nothing left to lose are usually the ones holding the one document nobody bothered to read. There's still a shell company nobody's fully traced, the contractor who poured that sand and vanished with a chunk of the money before the arrests. I've got a feeling he's not done showing up in my mailbox. That's a story for another day.